Rocket Robbie, a curious 6-year-old boy, loved adventures. He was always dreaming about exploring new places and discovering new things. He had reddish-brown hair, bright brown eyes, and a curiosity for learning the world around him. His eyes sparkled with excitement whenever he talked about his next big adventure. Today was a special day. It was the day he had been waiting for. All week, Robbie was going on a big adventure across the United States. He'd been planning this trip for months. He planned to visit lots of amazing places, from the bustling cities to the serene countryside. Robbie wanted to see it all. Robbie's special red rocket stood tall and shiny, ready for takeoff. It was his pride and joy, built with the help of his dad. It had a big, comfy seat just for him. Robbie made sure it was the coziest seat in the world. There were buttons that blinked and dials that glowed. Each one had a special function that Robbie had memorized. Robbie climbed inside, excited to start his journey. He could hardly contain his excitement. He fastened his seatbelt and put on his helmet. Safety first, he always reminded himself. He grabbed his map of the United States. It was filled with colorful drawings of all the places he wanted to visit. Where to first, Robbie wondered aloud. There were so many choices. His finger landed on a picture of a giant canyon. It looked so majestic and grand. The Grand Canyon, he exclaimed. It was the perfect first stop for his adventure. Robbie pushed a big red button. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The rocket rumbled and shook, ready to fly. The countdown began. Robbie's heart raced with excitement. 10, 9, 8, Robbie counted, his voice full of anticipation. He could feel the rocket's power building up. The rocket's engines roared to life. 3, 2, 1, and blast off! Robbie felt a rush of exhilaration. The red rocket zoomed into the sky, leaving a trail of sparkly stardust. Robbie's adventure had officially begun. The red rocket landed gently near the edge of a massive canyon. Robbie's eyes widened in amazement. The Grand Canyon stretched out before him, a vast and colorful landscape. It was much bigger than he had imagined. The rocks were red, orange, and brown. "Wow," Robbie whispered, taking it all in. He learned that the canyon was carved over millions of years by the Colorado River. Robbie carefully peered over the edge. He could see the tiny river winding its way through the canyon floor far below. He imagined tiny rafts floating down the river. Robbie took some pictures with his special rocket camera. He wanted to show his friends back home. Robbie climbed back into his rocket, feeling a sense of awe. The Grand Canyon was truly grand. It was time for his next adventure. The red rocket zoomed through the sky and landed near a loud rushing sound. Robbie knew instantly what it was. Niagara Falls! The water thundered over the edge of the cliffs. Spray misted Robbie's face. It felt cool and refreshing. Niagara Falls was even more impressive than he had imagined. 3 waterfalls made up Niagara Falls. Robbie learned that the largest waterfall was called Horseshoe Falls. Robbie watched the water cascade down into the swirling pools below. He learned that millions of gallons of water flowed over the falls every second. Robbie waved to Canada. He hoped to visit there someday too. He climbed back into his red rocket, ready for his next destination. Robbie's red rocket landed near a long, winding river. The sight of the river made him curious and excited. This was the Mississippi River, one of the longest rivers in North America. It stretched over 2,300 miles, winding its way through the heart of the country. Robbie knew that the Mississippi River was important for transportation. It had been a major route for boats and ships for centuries. He imagined steamboats chugging along the river, their big paddle wheels turning and splashing water. Robbie learned that the Mississippi River flowed from Minnesota all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. It passed through 10 states, connecting many communities. That was a very long way. He marveled at how such a long river could connect so many places. He imagined all the different animals and plants that lived along the riverbanks. The river was teeming with life. He dipped his hand into the water, feeling a connection to the vast river. It felt cool and smooth, like a gentle caress from nature. Robbie learned that the Mississippi River was home to many kinds of fish. It was a thriving ecosystem. He imagined catfish and turtles swimming in the muddy water, each playing their part in the river's life. Robbie skipped some stones across the surface of the river. Plop, plop, plop. Each stone danced across the water. He counted how many skips each stone made, trying to beat his own record. The Mississippi River was a peaceful and beautiful place. It was a perfect spot for reflection and adventure. He climbed back into his red rocket, feeling happy and content. The river had given him a sense of wonder and joy. Yellowstone's wonders. The red rocket landed in a place that smelled like sulfur. Robbie wrinkled his nose. What's that smell, he wondered. He was in Yellowstone National Park, a land of geysers and hot springs. Bubbling mud pots gurgled and steamed. Robbie thought they looked like giant bowls of soup. Robbie learned that Yellowstone was famous for its geysers, like Old Faithful. Old Faithful erupted hot water high into the air. Robbie watched in amazement as the geyser erupted. It was like a giant fountain. He learned that Old Faithful erupted every hour or so. Robbie saw colorful hot springs. The water was so hot that steam rose from the surface. He learned that the bright colors came from minerals in the water. He took some pictures of the geysers and hot springs. He climbed back into his red rocket, excited to explore more of America. Rocky Mountain High. Robbie's red rocket soared into the sky, cutting through the clouds and landed amongst towering snow-capped mountains that seemed to touch the heavens. He was in the Rocky Mountains. The air was crisp and cool, filling his lungs with a refreshing chill that made him feel alive. Robbie took a deep breath. It smelled fresh and clean, like nature's own perfume, untouched by the hustle and bustle of city life. The mountains were tall and jagged, their peaks piercing the sky. Robbie learned that the Rocky Mountains stretched all the way from Canada to New Mexico, a vast and majestic range. They were a very long mountain range. He imagined mountain goats climbing the steep cliffs with ease, their hooves gripping the rocky surfaces. He knew they were very good climbers, almost like acrobats of the mountains. Robbie learned that the Rocky Mountains were home to many different kinds of trees and plants, each adapted to the harsh conditions. He saw tall pine trees standing like sentinels and colorful wildflowers dotting the landscape, adding splashes of color to the green and brown terrain. He took out his notebook and drew a picture of a mountain goat standing proudly on a rocky peak, capturing the essence of the rugged beauty around him. Robbie imagined skiing down the snowy slopes in the winter, feeling the rush of cold air against his face as he sped down the mountainside. He threw a snowball, watching it arc through the air before it landed with a soft thud. He climbed back into his red rocket, feeling invigorated by the mountain air and the adventure he had just experienced. Everglades exploration. The red rocket landed in a warm, swampy place. Robbie was in the Everglades, a vast wetland in Florida. Tall grasses swayed in the breeze. He heard the croaking of frogs and the buzzing of insects. The air was humid and warm. Robbie learned that the Everglades was home to many different kinds of animals, including alligators, crocodiles, and snakes. He hoped to see an alligator. He knew he had to be careful, though. Robbie saw a long, scaly creature slithering through the water. It was an alligator. Robbie quickly took a picture. He was excited to have seen one of the Everglades' most famous residents. Robbie took a boat ride through the shallow water. He saw birds wading in the marshes. He climbed back into his red rocket, feeling thankful for the unique ecosystem of the Everglades. Rushmore's faces. Robbie's red rocket zoomed across the country and landed near a giant mountain with carved faces. He was at Mount Rushmore. 4 enormous faces stared out from the mountainside. Robbie recognized them instantly. They were the faces of 4 famous U.S. presidents: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Robbie learned that each face was about 60 feet tall. That was taller than his house. He imagined how long it must have taken to carve the faces. He learned that it took 14 years to complete the carving. Robbie took out his notebook and wrote down the names of the 4 presidents. He wanted to learn more about them when he got home. He walked around the base of the mountain taking pictures from different angles. He climbed back into his red rocket, feeling proud of his country's history. Great Lakes galore. Robbie's red rocket landed near a vast expanse of sparkling blue water. He was at the Great Lakes. Robbie learned that there were 5 Great Lakes: Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. He tried to remember their names. Robbie learned that the Great Lakes held a lot of fresh water. He imagined all the fish that lived in the lakes. He thought about all the boats that sailed on the lakes. Robbie took a boat ride on Lake Michigan. He felt the cool breeze on his face. He saw seagulls flying overhead. He watched the waves lap against the shore. He climbed back into his red rocket, feeling refreshed by the lake air. Mojave Mystery. The red rocket landed in a hot, dry place. Robbie was in the Mojave Desert. Sand stretched as far as the eye could see. The air was hot and dry. Robbie wiped his brow. He took a sip of water from his canteen. Robbie learned that the Mojave Desert was home to many different kinds of cacti and other desert plants. He saw tall saguaro cacti with their arms reaching towards the sky. Robbie saw a small lizard darting across the sand. He imagined snakes and scorpions hiding under rocks. Robbie climbed back into his red rocket, grateful for the shade and air conditioning. Hawaiian heat. Robbie's red rocket zoomed across the Pacific Ocean and landed on a beautiful island. He was in Hawaii. Palm trees swayed in the warm breeze. The air smelled like flowers and the ocean. He could hear the sound of waves crashing on the shore. Robbie learned that Hawaii was made up of many islands. He was on the Big Island, the largest of the Hawaiian Islands. He learned that Hawaii was famous for its volcanoes. Robbie visited Kilauea, an active volcano. He saw hot lava flowing down the mountainside. It glowed red hot. He learned that the volcanoes were formed when molten rock from deep inside the earth erupted onto the surface. Robbie took a helicopter ride over the volcano. He climbed back into his red rocket, amazed by the power of nature. Homeward bound, Robbie's red rocket soared into the sky, leaving the Hawaiian Islands behind. He was heading home, his heart full of amazing memories. He had seen so many incredible places. He had learned so many interesting things. He thought about the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, the Mississippi River, Yellowstone National Park, the Rocky Mountains, the Everglades, Mount Rushmore, the Great Lakes, the Mojave Desert, and Hawaii's volcanoes. Each place was special and unique. He looked out the window at the earth below. It looked so beautiful from up high. He felt lucky to have had such an amazing adventure. He couldn't wait to tell his friends and family all about it. The red rocket landed gently in Robbie's backyard. He knew this wasn't the end of his adventures, it was just the beginning.